welcome back to the Dade Moran podcast series featuring market stories on digitalization and the future of work. Now more than ever, we see that just organizations worldwide are attempting to navigate increasingly uncertain times with the risk landscape rapidly changing. So in a series of in-depth interviews with business leaders, policymakers, and academics, we're going to explore how the future of work is more digital, more innovative, and more connected than ever. And today I'm excited to have with me Sandy Nessing, who is AEP's Managing Director of Corporate Sustainability. Welcome, Sandy, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So Sandy, before we dive in, could you just tell us a little bit more about your role at AEP and AEP's specific focus areas?
Yeah, so I've been with AEP for over 14 years and actually started sustainability there so many years ago. I've probably about 23 years in the utility industry between electric and natural gas. And I came to this role through a career of journalism, public relations, and corporate communications, which has all served me very well in this role. And for what I do at AEP, it's all the non-financial performance disclosure. So all the ESG reporting, we produce an annual sustainability report. We also do a GRI report. We map to TCFD. This year, we're also going to map to SASB. We do an investor ESG report through EEI, the Edison Electric Institute. We also do a customer report on GHG emissions for them because we're in their scope 2 emissions. And then, of course, all the surveys. So it keeps us pretty busy. And, we also engage with lots of different stakeholders. And yes, we try to get some actual sustainability work done. So we don't want to be just reporting. We want to actually make a difference and actually do something. So we also look for projects across AEP to get involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the first times that we actually met and had a discussion was during a panel in New York City around stakeholder engagement, where you were sharing, some of the best practices that you've applied at AEP to really engage with these different types of stakeholders that you just spoke to.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think, no, go ahead.
Please.
No, I was going to say stakeholder engagement is as important today as it ever was. It has evolved over time for sure. But if you think about the time that we're in and the importance of transparency and relationships, I think we're at a moment in time with COVID-19 and climate change where the societal impact that companies have is, very prominent. And it's really important to engage your stakeholders around those issues. And so while, when I first started out with AEP, it was really about environmental groups and NGOs. I mean, that's really what it is, because climate change is our primary issue that we engage on. But over time, it's really climate change is still the primary issue, but it's really a lot of investors that we talk to and a lot of customers, and as well as the NGOs, and also community leaders and regulators. And it's really changed a lot, but it's as important as it ever has been. It's all about relationships, and we have been committed to that for, more than a decades, I would say, because it predates me as well. And just really, in tune with what and how, what our stakeholders are thinking, how important that is to us. It gives us a different viewpoint. And so, we've always had an open door policy. We try to bring our A team to the table every time, regardless of who it is. And I think we've got a great reputation for doing that. So it's one of my favorite parts of my job, actually, is stakeholder engagement, because I believe that when you bring two parties together, regardless of what their perspectives are, that human connection changes that relationship forever in a very positive way. You may still not agree on things when you walk away, but you have a different perspective on it. And it opens the door to that dialogue that maybe previously wasn't possible.
Absolutely. And, the human connection element, especially in the current crisis that we are experiencing, is evolving. and becoming much more significant, but also becoming much more digital. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious if you can speak to, the digital transformation that you're undergoing now at AEP, and how you're ensuring that you're leveraging different digital solutions out there to help you stay connected with that external environment and understand different stakeholder views.
Yeah, so we actually have a digital hub at AEP and a chief digital officer. We call it Charge, and Charge has been assigned the role of using digital to help us to achieve operational efficiencies, improve safety on the job, innovate around technologies, and also and reduce costs. Obviously, the more efficient you become, you can pull costs out and divert those resources somewhere else, which is what you want to be able to do. So Charge has been super active, and they've been given a goal that by 2023 to achieve a $200 million savings of O&M across the enterprise. Through 2019, they've delivered 40 million of that, and that's just about a year and a half of being in place. So it's still a really new organization, but doing some really amazing things. So, somebody in the field will come to them with an issue, or how can we make this process better? They go into their innovation lab and they have 3D printers and all kinds of things, and they have data analytics experts. I mean, I'm blown away every time I go into their location. So one of the things that they did in the past year is they created a tool called Circuit Safe. It's a desktop and mobile app that allows dispatchers and line workers to do some of their work more safely and more efficiently. So there are opportunities to increase the barrier between the worker and the potential risk of working around electricity. And Circuit Safe is one of those things where they can do some of that digitally. They don't have to actually physically go there. They've also developed a safety and health dashboard that enhances the visibility of all the analytics following a safety incident. So we want to know every time somebody gets hurt, what was the root cause of that? Not who was to blame. What's the root cause? Was it a process? Was it a procedure? Was it the lack of a tool? What is it that we can, what is it that event tells us that we can then take proactive action to prevent harm in the future? And I think one of the things that I'm probably most proud, and it just gives me goosebumps, that the Charge team has done during this crisis with the COVID-19, they said, what can we do? Using digital, using innovation, what can we do to make a difference? So one of the things they did is they refactored one of their 3D innovation or 3D printers, and they've been making the transparent face shields that healthcare workers need on the front line. So they're making hundreds of those a day. They've got a 24/7 shift going just to make the face shields that they can deliver to healthcare workers across our service territory. And the other thing that they're doing is, one of the concerns that, and one of the things that you check to see whether or not you may be infected with COVID is you take your temperature, right? But you've got lots of people coming in and they need to be self-monitoring. So they're looking into wearable and piloting wearable technologies where you don't have to come to the door and get your temperature changed, but wearable technology will provide that information. So that business unit within AEP is doing some phenomenal things around digital and very exciting things, and really making a difference. While their main focus is internal, they saw this pandemic as an opportunity to take what they have with analytics and innovation and all of their skills and turn it outward. And while they're looking at all these process improvements and things like that, they're also looking to develop marketable intellectual property. So they're looking for things that can benefit the entire industry as well. So to your point, it is where the future is. It's in digital.
Wow, that's fascinating. And 2 points that you'd mentioned there is just about the proactivity that technology
Mm.
can enable the scalability and, just
Yeah.
speed and efficiency in actually bringing innovation to the market quickly, but also in terms of informing decision making and, ensuring that you have reliable information to improve decision making processes. And within your team as well, that's something that we've been collaborating on through your use
Mm-hmm.
of Datamaran, in terms of being able to monitor the external landscape to see how different types of stakeholder expectations are changing around ESG issues. So I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more to, how you've been leveraging digital technologies within your ESG strategy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's really important. And Datamaran is an important tool in that toolbox. To be able to go and scan the global landscape on ESG is so critical to understanding what those emerging trends and issues are that could be coming this way. And human capital management is a classic example of that, right? So we started seeing that within the last year and a half, that was beginning to emerge as an issue. And it wasn't quite there here in the United States, but it was elsewhere. And it was starting to creep in, and it was something we were able to see because of the data analytics and being able to look at what other, maybe regulations that were being developed or thought about in other countries. That really helps us inform, how we prepare and how we move forward on ESG. So really, really critical. Can't say enough about that. We use other tools, like we use the Bloomberg Terminal, for example. That's their ESG platform is really important to us. It gives us a view of what they're seeing and how they're rating us. It's just another way to look at different data. And so it is really important. When you bring forward an issue or a concern or whatever it is, and you can back it up with data, you have a much stronger case, and you're much more credible in that as well. So being able to show, for example, the board and executive management, how human capital management was coming to the forefront, and certainly it's there with COVID-19, right? I mean, it is the exclamation point on social, on the S in ESG. But because of what we've been able to do and see through Datamaran, we've been able to prepare for that eventuality, so that now that it's here, we have a much better understanding of what the issues are and how to handle that and how to manage through it.
That's fantastic. And obviously that makes us feel quite good about the work that we're doing, the investment that we're making to support you in that. And in terms of human capital management, something that we've started to talk about is the just transition. And I know that this is a key focus area for you at AEP in relation to your ESG strategy. And I know it's an increasing focus for peers in your industry, but also for financial services firms who are looking at this. So could you speak a little bit more to what the just transition is and how you're internalizing that at AEP?
Yeah, so, we've been doing this work around just transition for years. We just never called it that. And the way that we internalize what that means is, as we make this shift to a clean energy economy, that means that there's a big transition from fossil fuels to renewables, for example. We have and historically have had a large fossil fuel fleet, coal to be specific, a very large coal fleet. Well, as we make this transition, and as those plants become, out of the money, so to speak, because of other factors like low natural gas prices or the age of the plants make them uneconomic to make, additional capital investments, and we plan to retire those units, we need to understand what the impact is to our workforce, but also to the communities where those plants are located. So there are a couple things that that are really important to us. And we have comprehensive plans because we've already shuttered several coal units across our service territory. So we have a really good blueprint for how to do this. But I have a team right now that's looking at it again to make sure going forward that we aren't missing something and that there aren't gaps or there are best practices that we could apply because times are different than they were, 8 or 10 years ago. So some of the things that that we look at is how do we help our employees? Because, power plants typically in the communities where they are located are the biggest employer. They have the highest paying jobs. They're typically one of the highest taxpayers, which supports education and public safety services and social services within these communities. And there's loyalty to the plant too, because in a lot of cases, it's generations of families that have worked there. And so when you're about to retire a unit and you're working with your employees to try to find them other jobs within the company, well, sometimes that requires relocation and they don't want to relocate. They're really embedded within that community. And so how do we work with them and how do we prepare them? So from the employee perspective, there's a lot of retraining, a lot of, getting ready to re-enter the job market in a different way, maybe with a different skill set. There's a lot of outplacement services that we provide, but we try to keep as many people as we can, but we also recognize that that's not always realistic because people don't want to go from Ohio or Texas, for example, for a job, but maybe they're, 5 years out from retirement and their family's here. So, so we have those issues. So we also look at the community. Again, these plants are anchors in those communities. And just transition is a huge issue. There's so many different aspects to it, and we alone cannot solve that issue. We can't write a blank check. We can't guarantee that a new industry will come into the community. But what we can do is bring our expertise and our experience around economic and business development to bear. We provide local training to help. What we want these communities to do is to be sustainable, be able to, attract new business and new industries. And so we put people to work helping those communities do that. It's not perfect. In some places, it's easier than others because you almost have to create a job market. You have to create a market for something, right? One of the things that we did that has been really successful about probably 4 or 5 years ago now, we looked at the skill sets of coal plant workers and miners in Appalachia. And we, through a pretty intensive survey of skill sets, we wanted to know what other industry do those support? Do those skills match up with? And we found that those skills are transferable to the aerospace industry. And so we started to develop, working with the local communities, we started to develop locations within those states to help them diversify their economies that were aero-ready sites and get them certified so that an aerospace industry company, whether it's a supplier to that industry or whatever, could come in and know that the infrastructure and the skills, the workforce was there to be able to, to start up a different industry, right? So we've got, I think we're close to almost 20 aero-ready sites that we've certified in West Virginia, Kentucky, and I think Ohio as well. And we've got more in the pipeline. So this is a great way for, think about an economy like West Virginia that is so coal dependent and being able to attract the aerospace industry and begin to transfer those skills of those miners and coal plant workers to different industries. And the other piece of that is working from a regulatory and a legislative perspective. So our government affairs team has been working to help the legislators understand how important it is to have renewable energy, tariffs or laws or something that makes it, user friendly. Because if you don't make it easy for a company that wants renewable energy, for example, to get it in your state, then you're never going to attract, the Facebooks and Googles of the world. They will never go to West Virginia. So that was another accomplishment last year that, our government affairs team was instrumental in helping to get that passed in the state. That opens the door. It's not, the panacea, but it opens the door. And that's what needs to happen step by step to diversify that state's economy. So that's how we look at just transition. It's not something that we can carry by ourselves, but it's something that we can provide support and training and tools to help those communities retool themselves, diversify, and be sustainable for the long term.
Wow, it's such a powerful example of the importance of thinking about short and long term, and also having different types of stakeholders engaged on a strategy to really achieve a successful endpoint. And there really is no endpoint; it's an ongoing process,
right,
of course. But it really just brings that to light. And I think that's why what we're seeing more and more within the Data Moran community is that there is increasing spotlight, which in a lot of companies, maybe there wasn't sufficient spotlight, but it seems that the current crisis is starting to put more spotlight on the importance of sustainability, of ESG, and the experts internally who really can understand that type of complex thinking and doing that you were just speaking to within the just transition, which is just one component of a sustainability strategy. So I'm just curious, how do you see the current crisis evolving sustainability and ESG practices at companies globally?
Wow, that's a big question. I think that, to your point, it does bring ESG and sustainability and the importance of the teams that exist that do this work within companies to the forefront and make them invaluable to companies. I mean, as all of this was unfolding in March here in Ohio, and we were, mid-March, we started working from home. And I started to think, and kind of watch, what was going on the internet and what some of the investors, and just look at what's going on in the world, and really started to prepare. And it's something that people didn't want to hear about because it's like, okay, I get that. I know it's going to be important, but right now we got to deal with the crisis in front of us. Well, this is the time when a company really needs to show its corporate purpose and step up to show that leadership, provide assurance. And so what I've been doing is being that voice, if you will, that kind of brings that to the table. We're coming up on an earnings call, our very first earnings call since this crisis began. And, how do you approach that? You don't just talk about your quarterly earnings, right? So again, it's an opportunity to really speak to who you are as a company and put your money where your mouth is. And that's, I think, where the ESG team comes into play, and where I think that, sustainability teams, ESG teams, whatever you want to call them, they are critical partners as we move forward beyond this crisis, because we have more scrutiny on us than ever before. Look at what Just Capital is doing. They're tracking what the 100 biggest companies in the U.S., how are they responding to this crisis? They're going to be asking us those questions and looking at what we're doing. And we're doing some really great things. And we need to tell that story. And that's part of, transparency. We've got to get out there and tell that story. Otherwise, the perception is we're not doing anything. And so I think that's really important. I think that it just really escalates the importance of ESG and what we're here to do. And to be that conscience, if you will, on the shoulder of the company and say, we really need to be considering how we talk about these things, not just that we're doing something, but how compassionate and the empathy that we have. And, it's more than, it's not just your corporate face anymore. This is all about people. And this couldn't, and the linkage to climate change too is really interesting. You see the pictures from all around the world and with all the vehicles off the road and how that's improved. And, we have to temper that. I mean, that's amazing to see when you look at the pictures of LA or New York, or you see the Himalayas, not shrouded in air pollution. But you also have to remember that came at a significant price, both economically and personally, to people. And so while climate change remains like a top of, front burner issue, we have to remember what the price, are we willing to pay that price? And how do we get there? We'll get there, but how do we get there? How do we leverage this moment? It feels like we're at a moment in time where, we can, as we emerge from this, can we move faster, toward that greener, cleaner economy? And I think that's where we have to be thinking, and our actions will speak to that.
Absolutely. It's about, systemic risks that we're facing and the systemic change that is required to really deal with these types of complex situations that require input from everybody, and particularly corporate leaders, to your point, who have to think about, the environmental and economic and social impacts and how that's translated into governance practices and processes. And you brought up a good point about authenticity and companies really being authentic in the way that they showcase and activate their purpose beyond profit. And that's one thing that I think, you in particular and AEP generally have been really a leader in, being authentic about, what you're trying to achieve, and effectively telling that stories to different types of stakeholders who need to hear that story and want to hear that story. So thank you for being a leader there and pushing us forward and showing how we can do that. Well, we've covered a lot of really interesting topics, which we could spend, hours, and we've spent hours talking about.
Yes, indeed.
So we'll continue the conversation, absolutely. But, if we were to sum up some of the key points and talking points into a single call to action, is something that you just want to leave us with, Sandy?
Yes, and actually I'm going to borrow this from someone else, because I've been doing a lot of research on what people are saying and thinking, and this one actually comes from Barclays, which I thought was a really good summary of, they made a good point in saying that the pandemic creates a greater sense of urgency and responsibility toward everything from consumer behavior to climate change, supply chain practices, and the future of work and mobility, and potentially alter the nature of investment process as a result. To me, that sums it up. This is a new day, right? And, we've seen human versus, nature, and nature won this time. So we've got to kind of get our arms around that and understand how important a role that ESG plays today and going forward.
Great. Well, thank you for that. A powerful message. And we at Data Marin are doing our part to, support you through these uncertain times, providing as much reliable information as we can on the different, corporate, regulatory, and media developments that are happening around COVID-19 specifically, but also ESG issues more broadly. Thank you for being an inspiration to us to continue doing that and to continue powering through uncertain times, as this podcast is titled. Appreciate you taking the time and look forward to seeing how this journey evolves.
Yeah, thank you.